we had a forum with the Gateway Cities Innovation here in Massachusetts. And one of the questions is, well, how do we attract more choice riders? And what I said is the best way to attract so-called choice riders is make sure that you're serving your existing ridership as well as you possibly can, and they'll ride.
This is Transit Unplugged. I'm Paul Comfort. Good to be with you on another edition of the world's leading transit executive podcast, Transit Unplugged In Depth this week, with our special guest, Noah Berger, who is administrator of the Merrimack Valley Transit System in Massachusetts. Noah, thank you for being a guest today.
No, thank you, Paul. And I'm always impressed. You have such a great radio voice. I'm always jealous because I fear I don't.
Well, thank you. As you probably know, we've talked, you and I are friends. I honed it during 16 years of Comfort's Corner on a local radio station here earlier in my 20s and 30s. Hey, Noah, we've done a lot together, you and I have. I'm surprised I haven't had you on the podcast up until now, but I'm glad we finally got it in here in our 6th season. You're doing some amazing things there at Merrimack Valley, but you and I have also done some great things together. One of the things we did is we worked on our book, Conversations on Equity and Inclusion in Public Transportation, and you also have been a guest recently, along with one of your employees there, on our safety podcast, Preventing Driver Assaults, that we put together for CTAA funded by FTA. So we're going to talk about that in just a minute, as well as some awesome things. I mean, the fact that you have increased ridership 122% and you've gone fare free, man, I want to talk all about that in just a minute. But before we dive into that, tell us first off, tell our listeners about your transit system.
Right. So we cover the 16 cities and towns in the northeast corner of Massachusetts, where the center of gravity are the gateway cities of Lawrence, Haverhill, and Methuen. But we go all the way to the Atlantic Ocean, Salisbury, Newburyport, and then we have more sort of rural communities that we serve with demand response in other parts of the service area. We carry about 2 million riders a year. It's an area that really needs strong public transportation. I think what often surprises people, our largest city, Lawrence, is actually 83% Latino. People don't expect that to be a community in Massachusetts. They think it's got to be in Florida or Texas. But that's that. You know, we have the communities in Massachusetts. We call them gateway cities because they're former mill towns that they've always attracted immigrants. It's the same story with just different groups over the years. The mills have recently been repurposed, and they see a lot of vibrancy and new life in those communities.
That's great. Tell us about the modes of transportation you operate there. Is it fixed route, paratransit, micro? Tell us a little about that.
Yeah, so it's really, we have two business lines. We have the fixed route and the demand response. You know, what we're working hard to do is integrate them together. The fixed, we have about 26 fixed route buses, and as well as the demand response service that's not just ADA paratransit. We have some ring and rides in non-ADA communities. And we're trying to simplify the service. So, we can get into that as we talk further.
That's great. So do you operate your service directly or do you contract it out?
We technically contract it out. It's the way the law was written back in the 70s, it was to protect the private mom and pop operators that were running local transit, before they started became financially unviable. We actually now have a subcorp that is pretty much our operating company. I treat them like they're a department within our company. Technically, it's DGR management, which is she's one person who runs the PVTA in Springfield, Massachusetts, and now us. She's the general manager here. It really is a consultant that helps out with our operations staff. So that's turned out to be a very good relationship. We contracted with her just this past summer.
That's wonderful. Tell us about the governance of the agency. You have a board, you have and financing. Tell us how all that works.
It's called an advisory board, but they're not really just advisory. It's made up of the 16 cities and towns, the chief elected official or their designee, and then we have a disability rep and a riders rep, and that's all in statute. And it's a weighted vote. Then
interesting.
Which it means it's very important for Lawrence and Haverhill to attend all meetings.
Because they have the biggest populations and the biggest financial contributions, so they get a more of a vote?
Exactly.
Okay.
And it becomes quorum becomes a challenge when either one of them doesn't show up.
Do you have monthly meetings with the board?
We have mostly monthly meetings. We skip some months. We usually don't meet July and August. We devote, like this month, we devote to subcommittee meetings as well as April. So, but it's mostly it's a qualified monthly meeting.
Yeah, that's interesting. And for people kind of trying to get a picture in their mind where it's at. Boston is the big city people know about in Massachusetts. Are you kind of suburbs of are they a suburb of you, or how do you want to say?
Yeah, right. We're in many ways our own world, but we are, we're about 45 minutes, depending on which town, from Boston. There are definitely, some bedroom communities, but some communities that really are their own,
kind of
their own
standalone.
ecosystem. And then we're right at the New Hampshire border, so there's a lot of, interstate travel back and.
Right. Do you go over state lines with your service?
We do.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay. So one of the things that fascinated me, Noah, there's a number of things. I think you're one of the coolest guys in our business, bringing in kind of the right and left brain approach to what we're doing here. I really appreciate your focus on the arts and on color and on, music and all that with transit. Tell us about some of the great things you've been doing there.
Right. I mean, I think it's, what was a revelation for me is that when I first started back about a year and a half ago now, and I, got on the buses, I went out to community groups and I talked to people. And, I was thinking that the questions are, what do we do well and what do we do not so well, and prepared for both. What I wasn't as prepared for is the third option was, we don't know. You guys are irrelevant to us. And became very clear that we were not doing a good job of being present in the community, being visible to the community. So we've been on a pretty robust campaign to change that. And so some of the things have been higher profile, some of the things have been lower profile. But you mentioned that we went fare free in last March. That has been a tremendous success. And we, not only did we go fare free, and that was on both paratransit and the fixed route, we also took the fare boxes out, which I think sends a message. A lot of times when, your transit authorities are sort of putting their foot in the water for going fare free, we don't want to fully commit and keep the fare boxes up. It sends a different message. I think we also took a hard look at our routes, and what we had historically tried to do is, for our fixed routes in particular, tried to have them do too much. And so they basically have routes that zig and zag and pull into every little area, make really odd choice. We had inbounds that were completely different from the outbounds, so that on a map, it looked like you served an area, but if you couldn't get back to where you started from, you really weren't serving that area. So we've been changing the routes, making them more direct, working with the community to make sure that no one's left behind. But I think that's been, the community's appreciated that. And I think the way I've messaged is we're doing a better job of respecting our riders' time. And we're also making it more logical. We're going to unfurl another bunch of route changes, but also with changing the route numbers, because for reasons that no one can explain to me, our route numbers made no logical sense. We have one single digit route. Then we jump into the teens, then we jump into the 30s, and then we jump into the 50s. So it's all makes logical sense. So the 32 is going to become the 2. The 33 is going to become the 3, and so on. It also shows sort of, it makes a difference. It's like a low number license plate. It shows, if you have a lower number route, it shows you that community, they're important. So that's going to be rolled out in April. Another thing is, we've talked about this. We're currently a flag stop system, and we're putting out bus stops, which and first of all, the drivers can't wait to have that happen. The joke is we have the 50-foot express where I'm waiting here and you're waiting, a couple of feet down, down the sidewalk, and someone else, and this way to consolidate. But it's also for the riders, you have a less intimidating experience if there's a sign for the bus. It'll tell me what route stopping there. It'll tell me where it's going. So it's no longer a leap of faith to just wait on the side of the road and hope that a bus drives. You've
had an amazing increase in ridership since you've gone fare free. last year. I want you to, in a minute, dig into that fare-free decision because that was so fascinating when you and I talked about that for the book. But tell us about how ridership has increased since you've gone fare-free. It's been almost a year now.
We've gone up, almost 122%. And that's, that's understanding. I think the great parallel statistic for that is that complaints have actually gone down by over a third.
Interesting.
So we have more riders and fewer complaints, and that just takes away some of the adversarial relationship between drivers and passengers. I think I think taking away the fare boxes made sense in terms of just kind of tearing down that wall between the drivers and the passengers, and it makes it a more welcoming experience. We've paired that with other things. So one of the things we just did this fall is as part of that whole rebranding campaign. So we're MeVa Transit.
Okay.
And that our buses literally had the same exact design as mail trucks.
That's mail trucks.
Respect to my friends in the postal service.
Yeah.
But that's not really the image we
like a blue and red stripe on a white vehicle.
A thin blue and red. It looks the exact same thing as a mail truck. And so we had a big community process, and we had some artistic minded members of the community who said what they wanted to see in a bus. And we have these. I love the design. I think and our designer who's done a lot of work in transit properties, she says, and she designed a lot of the other ones too, that this is the best one she's ever done. And it has, it's coral, it's aqua, it's yellow, and it's dynamic looking. It has pays homage to things in the community. So there are ripples that reflect the Merrimack River. One of the things that looking at all of our old mill buildings, we have clocks on every building here. There's old clock towers somehow make it everywhere.
Yes.
So we have these abstracted clocks, not too much to beat you over the head with it, but just enough to have a hint of the area. And then other things that I think are really important, particularly for the areas we serve. At the top of our bus says "Let's go," and then it says "Vamos." And that's a welcoming statement to the linguistically and culturally rich communities we travel through. And I think, Paul, in our industry, we've gotten very good at translating into Spanish all the things that you're not allowed to do. Don't stand in front of the yellow line. No radio playing, no eating, no drinking. Don't talk to the operator. But what we haven't had is that affirmative statement in Spanish translated. So it provides that welcoming. We're messaging to the community, you're all welcome on board. And then the other thing is that we're certainly not the first to do this, but from the disability community, rather than having the standard static disability emblem, we have the wheelchair looking on the go. Lean forward and letting folks know that people with disabilities, who is almost a fifth of our population, people with disabilities have places to go too. So I think all that has been very welcoming. And we wrap the vans too, our demand response vans, so that it helps show that we're one family of services, not two very distinct modes. And that's brought the vans into the realm of the services we provide in ways that people weren't fully aware.
That's really good, Noah. What we'll do is we'll post some pictures of your vehicles on our website, transitunplugged.com, with your episode. So that'll be fun. Hey, listen, we're going to take a quick break now for a word from Mike Bismeyer on leadership, kindness, and mentorship. And when we come back, Noah, I'm going to be talking to you about the pianos that you've put out throughout your system. And I also want to dive into the decision-making process you went through with your board to go to zero fare. That's next after this word from Mike Bismeyer on Transit Unplugged.
Hi, this is Mike Bismeyer, Transit and Kindness Advocate, and this is Mike's Minute, where we talk about mentorship, leadership, and kindness with the hopes it'll inspire you to pay it forward. Today's guest, Noah Berger, is yet another leader in transit that encompasses all these attributes. Notwithstanding the everyday business of moving people, many of the leaders in our industry continue to do much more. It is evident when you see the attendance at all the APTA and CUTA conferences, like the legislative this week and others throughout the year. Great minds meeting together and advocating for funding, change, and the advancement of transportation for all. Being in my 15th year of transit, I'm always grateful for those going above and beyond. Many of our industry leaders tirelessly tell the story of transit, and many appearing right here on this podcast, sharing what their agency does, what still needs to be done, and ideas to continue to enhance the service. There are both intentional and unintentional mentors in our industry. Again, many great leaders taking time to help prepare the leaders of the future, and many others simply doing great things every day that those working alongside are inspired to emulate. One of the comments that Noah made today truly resonated with me from all aspects: leadership, mentorship, and kindness. It was capturing that very essence of what transportation is and provides. His comment was as follows: working with the community to make sure no one is left behind. That is kindness at its core, and it inspires me to continue to want to be part of the continuing change in our industry. It's also one of those tidbits from today, along with his aim to be further connected to the community pulse, that I'm sure many will want to emulate and add to their personal toolbox. And speaking about going above and beyond, please don't forget that this coming March 18th is Transit Operator Appreciation Day. Please make sure to thank one of the operators, maybe a random act of kindness. Thanks for listening. Have a great week. Kindness is cool.
We're back for part 2 of our interview with Noah Berger, who is administrator of the Merrimack Valley Transit System in Massachusetts. And just before the break, Noah, you were telling me about the change in the color scheme and the design on your vehicles, which is awesome. But you've done some other really neat things when it comes to visual and arts, music. Tell us about the pianos you have. Of course, I play piano. I can't wait to get up there one day and play some.
No, that is awesome. This is happenstance that actually just fell into place last year, that there was a public art show that in another community where the artists came in, painted pianos, and it was ran only in the summer, and then they were looking for homes for the pianos afterwards. And so I said, sure, we'll take them, and we actually put them in the McGovern Transportation Center, which is also the Lawrence train station for the commuter rail run by the MVRTA. We serve it with a couple buses now, although our plan is to really activate that space and make that our central hub, which is another project we're involved in. But since then, that same arts organization did another show this past summer where they painted benches. So they were actually old church pews, and we ended up getting one of them that just happened to have a train on it. And when they found out that we were going to be the recipient, they painted MeVa on as the insignia for the train in our logo. So I thought that was another touch, to add that whimsy, that joy to the space. Where other things we're doing there is we had a former cafe that had been vacant for the last 10 years, and we used it to store toilet paper and detergent. What we ended up doing is saying, okay, it's challenging to put out an RFP, get the highest bidder. Then there's always issues there, and you have no limited control over what's shown there. So instead, what we did is we made it a incubator space. We're actually sort of renovating it right now. We're bringing in this local artist she's actually a natural nail artist, and she's going to put her space in there. And then it'll be over time, we'll rotate that and give other small businesses an opportunity to open up their first brick and mortar space. Another opportunity to activate the space. And our goal is to relocate the downtown hub we have in Lawrence that we don't own. It's owned by the city, and it's really, we've outgrown it, to this multimodal center that would be a vibrant center for the community.
Awesome. I love all that. I love making, you're weaving yourself more into the fabric of the community.
Yes, very much so.
That's great. Now, let's dive in for a few minutes on zero fares. Yeah. So you made a decision along with your board to go zero fare in March, and you're back up to over 90% of your pre-pandemic ridership. One of the only or few transit systems I'm aware of that have done that. Tell us about the decision process and the rationale for going zero fare.
Right. And I think, Paul, you've been out front with a lot of campaigns for transit authorities to go fare free. And so, we highlighted those examples. I think it helped that, not particularly radical communities, Kansas City, Albuquerque, it's, so it's not like it's this crazy idea that doesn't make any fiscal sense. So we highlighted that while we focused on some of the social benefits and that, transit is a public good that we want people to use, we should do everything we can to do it. But I also focused, for my board is very interested in, is it sustainable? Does it make fiscal sense? So we ran the numbers and, I think we very rarely look at the fully allocated cost of collecting fares. So if you count everything that goes into fare collection, and, we've had a long tortured history with the money room here, you have to hire the armored car, all the things that go into it, really 23.9 cents was all we saw for every dollar that we collected in the fare.
It's the tail wagging the dog in some respects. Right?
Absolutely. And and I think, it's a very inefficient way to generate revenue. So what we did is, it ended up being a unanimous vote of the board. And, we brought in experts to show what are the pros and cons, what is the long-term implications, and the reality too. And, Paul, this is just between you and me and maybe a few of your listeners, but, I'm admittedly making a bet here. And, like many of my peers, I have a strong but limited supply of COVID relief money, the CARES funds, the ARPA funds. And, when we look at our budget, we have what the fiscal people like to call a structural deficit, which means you're not in deficit now, but if things keep going as they're going, you will be. But the reality is, whether or not we were collecting fares, if we were running just a bare bones system, we'd still have to come and find a new way to generate revenue within a couple of years anyway. So I'm making the bet that if I put the best possible service on the road, make it as attractive to riders to get on board as I possibly can, it's going to be a lot easier for me to make that ask for the funding in 2 years than if I'm running that mediocre service that maybe costs a little bit more, but still is going to need more money. So that's the bet I'm making. And we're going to work our legislative delegation very hard. We actually have a meeting coming up next week with the whole Merrimack Valley delegation, and just make sure we're on the radar screen. Make sure that there's an understanding of how the funds flow. And we've got tremendous support from the delegation. We have a lot of new members this cycle, so just want to make sure that we get in early.
That's interesting. And what has been the reception in the community, would you say, to go into what you call it free fare? I've heard a lot of people tell me, "Oh, don't call it free because somebody has to pay. You've got to use zero fare," but they're interchangeable in some respects. But what's been the response from the community?
No, I mean the community has been, needless to say, loves it. I think what's interesting is that people only assume it's people in the worst financial situations who benefit, but it turns out that we're all kind of cheap. So people will try a service without the intimidation of having to figure out how to pay the fare or have to worry about it. It brings more people onto the system than otherwise would ride it. I know one of the questions, we had a forum with the Gateway Cities Innovation here in Massachusetts, and one of the questions is, well, how do we attract more choice riders? And I'm always kind of ambivalent about that term because it sounds sometimes like a choice cut of beef, but the reality is, and what I say is, the best way to attract so-called choice riders is make sure that you're serving your existing ridership as well as you possibly can, and they'll ride. The example is when we made our vehicles more accessible. That's obviously great for people with disabilities. It's also great for parents pushing strollers. It's great for people with shopping carts. It's great for someone who has a bum knee that wouldn't want to ride a lift, but a lot easier to take that one step than to climb all the way up the well. So a lot of things like that, you reach a greater greater audience by taking care of everyone.
That's great. In our book that you and I wrote together, along with 20 other top CEOs around the world, called Conversations on Equity and Inclusion in Public Transportation, you, in your chapter, man, you go really deep. So if our listeners are interested in a little bit more about the process, because we recorded that while you were in the middle of the process, I think, of getting it approved, and there's page after page after page of a real in-depth description.
Yeah, no, and I really appreciate the that we, you started that book now over a year ago. Because as when the stuff we were talking about, a lot of it here was theoretical, and we were talking about stuff that we were looking forward to implementing. And now that we've done, obviously the free fares, but the rebranding and the route optimization and things, those are now in place. So it's great to see that mark in time that we can compare to. I have to say too that you mentioned that, and you put it in a very charitable way, and I appreciate that. I read Jared Walker's review of your book.
Yes.
And I love the backhanded compliment he gave to our chapter, because he said that, the challenge of talking to transit CEOs is they're very good at staying on script. They're very, very good at messaging. And so, may not expose, the messy details of policy. So the fun example is Noah Berger in the Merrimack Valley. And the backhanded compliment, he's saying, no, don't quit your J job and think you could run for politics, because you wouldn't survive in politics. You're not supposed to say these things out loud.
Right. You were very granular and detailed, and you're right. Yeah, but that's that open transparency, I think, is what people loved about your chapter. And I got to tell you, Noah, the book went, as you know, to #1 on Amazon for mass transit books and stayed there for 6 weeks. It's the best-selling book I've ever put out. And it's largely because I've heard a ton of people tell me your chapter was one of the highlights. So thank you for that.
No, that was...
In our last couple of minutes, Noah, you've got a great background for finally running a transit system. Tell us a little about, your background in transit and working for government, et cetera.
Right. No, it's been a meandering path. Transit is something I've always appreciated. And, I grew up in New York City, and rode it all the time, fascinated by it. And, took me a little while to figure out you could do it for a living. But I spent about 15 years for the Federal Transit Administration. So seen both sides. I've worked in advocacy organizations and as well as with other transit properties. So it was certainly things I've been thinking about for a good long time. But also it's important to, all transit operations, we're all like snowflakes. We're a little bit different. And, it's important to figure out what the unique attributes of your system are, what the needs are, before you start doing some sort of cookie cutter changes that may work in one area but not work in yours.
That's good. So tell us though about your career, the positions you were in and before this.
Okay, well, and some of it includes vending at Yankee Stadium. I did have a stint where I worked for the mob, albeit it was a concession stand at the Miller concerts on the pier. But
you have to tell about it.
And yeah, I can say I can work for anyone, because I worked for John Gotti, I worked for George Steinbrenner, so everything else is a piece of cake since then. But yeah, so I've worked actually at homeless shelters. I worked for a community action program in Vermont, and I worked for an obscure agency in Boston that has some oversight over the MVRTA before spending 15 years for the federal government at FTA. Which is a very different perspective on transit. I think when I started, it was it was drilled into you that you are not transit advocates, you're program advocates. And I never quite let go of the transit advocacy side. So but it was great experience to really understand how funding flows and how it's prioritized. From there, I did some stints just at various transit properties before landing this job running the Merrimack Valley system, which is a terrific system, and I have a fabulous team that's with me every step of the way. That if they weren't there, obviously I wouldn't be able to have done any of this.
Well, congratulations on the work you've already done. In under 2 years, you've really made some dramatic improvements, I think, and some changes in the system. And be careful, because change agents, I have found, have a ticking time bomb on our back, metaphorically speaking.
No, I appreciate that, and I think the great line that I heard is that everybody loves change and everybody hates change, and both of those are true.
Yeah.
And I have to say, I think another sort of change that's kind of under the radar screen, but it's important, is it's not just the riders you have to take care of, you have to take care of your own people. And so one of the things that I'm most proud of is that we are one of the few transit agencies that been able to grow our workforce rather than see it shrink in the driver shortage. We're up almost 12%. Our drivers, which is, a lot of the stuff we're talking about. We increased frequency in Lawrence back in September. We could have done that without the bodies behind the wheel. And a lot of that is, making sure you're showing the drivers that they're important. We added a massage chair in the driver's lounge. We painted the driver's lounge. We added a high-end coffee machine that you can get fancy Italian coffees that I've never heard of before. But I have to tell you that the number one seller in the coffee machine is the hot chocolate. And that was started in the summer. So it's only going to get more so. But, I think that sends the message. They see me, I walk through there, I ride the buses, I talk to them. It's no longer confused. Oh my God, what did I do? Why is the administrator on my bus? Now it's an opportunity to talk, and hear the stuff that often doesn't get, doesn't surface. We put together initially it was going to be a good ideas group, and my human resources director changed it to the great ideas group, which is even better. But we have drivers and mechanics and reservationists all sit around saying, here are things we'd like to see change. So I'm told that the morale here is off the charts, and that
in a good way,
in a great way. And I think, I know that when Tracy Jones, who designed the she came out here for just to see the final products, and said, she's been to a number of transit properties, and she's never seen a place where people are as happy to be there as they are here, which that makes me feel good. And we can, without the drivers, we wouldn't be able to, and that sends the right message to the passengers.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think that your commitment to not just your passenger customers, but also your employee customers, so to speak, as an agency is commendable. And it's shown by the fact that you're one of the, you're a unicorn. You're standing out in the industry as somebody who actually is increasing the number of drivers so that you can do the things you want to do. I was recently in London talking with the head of the Irish National Transportation Authority, and I was in Denver talking to folks there, and both of them have great new plans to reboot their routes. They don't have enough operators to make it happen. So I think in addition to increased wages and benefits, there are a lot of other things like you talked about that we can do to improve the operating environment for them. And to be honest with you, I think reducing potential flashpoints of conflict, like at the fare box, may have something to do with it too.
Absolutely. And I think, recognizing that, we draw our workforce from the same community we draw our ridership from. And, that's, and for us in particular, it's, we have a significant Spanish speaking workforce. One of the things we did, I think we talked about this a year ago, this is, at the time we just rolled it out, but we used to have in our application must be fluent in English, and we took that out, and that was advice on one of the community groups. I mean, first of all, it turns out that we're all terrible at self-reporting our own fluency. It's and it turns out it broke down along gender lines too. That women are much more self-critical than men always think they're doing it right. So you ended up taking people off the table. That might have been a great bus driver, probably would be an even better bus driver, because you need that ability to be self-critical and be sensitive that you don't have. And it's also, if 83% of our largest city is Spanish speaking, why are we putting ourselves already at a disadvantage? So that's been terrific. Actually, of our new drivers, almost 74% are minorities, and over 30% are women, which wasn't the case before. So by thinking of your workforce as the same as being part and parcel with the community, I think that helps.
What an innovative approach, but it should be right there in front of us, right? Observing the obvious and then implementing it as policy. Amazing. Noah Berger, thank you so much for being our guest today on Transit Unplugged. I know our listeners around the world in over 100 countries will be fascinated by the things you've talked about today. We've hit so many hot topics. We wish you the very best as you continue to innovate and drive improvements for the passengers and the employees of your transit system.
All right. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Transit Unplugged in depth with our special guest, Noah Berger of the Merrimack Valley Regional Transit Authority. Now, Noah will also be talking about zero fares and a special debate during the Executive Summit at Think Transit. And there's still time to register for Think Transit and the Executive Summit. Just visit trapezegroup.com/thinktransit for all the information you need to register for either event. The Executive Summit is only $149 and gives you access to all of Think Transit. Coming up next week on Transit Unplugged News and Views, we have Conrad of Stark and Shari Burgess of the Utah Transit Authority. And don't forget to visit transitunplugged.com to sign up for the newsletter so you're always in the loop with what's going on in the show. But if you would like to email us, you can do so at info@transitunplugged.com. So until next week, ride safe and ride happy.
We hope you're enjoying this episode of Transit Unplugged, the podcast. How would you like to see behind-the-scenes footage of the agencies that Paul visits? Then be sure to check out Transit Unplugged TV on YouTube, where transit evangelist Paul Comfort dives into the culture, the food, and the transit of major cities around the world. You'll see the operations control centers, how maintenance shops work, and the latest innovations taking place at agencies around the globe as we work together to improve the lives of our transit riders and our communities. Be sure to subscribe to Transit Unplugged TV on YouTube or at transitunplugged.com.